Find out how to become a better filmmaker by doing a little bit every day. In the past, filmmaking exercises involved digging out a camera and loading it with film. That's if you had some. Otherwise, you'd need a trip to the shops first. And one roll of Super 8mm film only lasted 4 minutes. So, unless you were wealthy enough to buy a bunch of rolls of film, you had to stop practicing after 4 minutes shooting. Then you had to wait a few days or weeks before your roll of film returned from the lab. Before digital video, the idea of filming every day would have involved a great expense and a house full of rolls of film. And before smartphones were invented, you still had to think to take a camera with you. With smartphones, that's all changed. And this is how you can make the most of the high-definition video camera in your pocket. I only managed a year of art college. This was back in the 1980s and I was still a teenager, and in those days college was free for us Brits. But a year was enough to convince me that if I wanted to learn something, I would rather just teach myself. This is 23 years before YouTube was invented. Personally, I like to learn on the job, probably because I find it hard to motivate myself when the work is just an exercise or a theoretical study. Perhaps that impatience cost me time in the long run, because I expected to be good at things right away, and that's just not possible for most of us mortals. Anyway, one thing I remember from art school was being told as art students we must always be sketching. Our tutors stressed to us many times that we really must carry a sketch pad with us at all times, and that every spare moment should be an opportunity for a sketch. As an 18-year-old, I was very about that instruction, and most other instructions, to be honest. However, I did actually carry a sketch pad around, and once in a while even sketch something in it. And over the year, I got a bit better at sketching stuff. With maturity and hindsight, I now understand why our tutors made such a big point of this. Possessed by youthful impatience, I just wanted to get on with real art, not this boring practice stuff. However, the real art I was doing consistently failed to achieve the greatness I hoped it would. As it turns out, great things come from repetition. Look back through history and you'll find that pretty much everyone who achieved great things did so by quietly repeating some boring activity or other for years, sometimes decades. The problem with filmmaking is you can't really do spontaneous sketches like I did as an 18-year-old with a sketch pad and a pencil. Until now, that is. The point my art tutors were trying to impress on us is, even if you aspire to be the next Andy Warhol or Tracy Emin, it's actually the boring repetition which gets you there. And it's not just about learning the physical skill of sketching. The practice exercises your creative muscle and gets you looking at the world as an artist. Now, with our smartphones at our fingertips, pretty much 24/7, we can do video sketching. Thing is, you can practice videography with your smartphone anytime you have a spare moment. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've been doing this myself and really enjoying it. So, I'm just going to throw some thoughts out there for you.
A common fault is to shoot from a straight-on position without considering perspective. The automobile and table appear uninteresting when photographed this way. The most pleasing way of seeing an object is from an angle. And when we see 2 or more sides, we get a feeling of depth. Now the table and automobile take on added interest.
But really, if you want to learn to be a better filmmaker, take any opportunity that comes. Basically, if you're always thinking of a potential nice shot, you're thinking like a filmmaker. Family gathering. Make sure you offer to be the one who takes the videos and photos. Most of the time, people find this to be something of a chore, so they'll be happy when you volunteer. But instead of the usual bad family video, take your time and think about your shots. I quite often film a family gathering while people are not aware, so I capture them more naturally. But I also think about framing and lighting and try to get the best shots I can. A couple of days ago, I went on a mountain walk and I watched a tourist filming with her smartphone. She did the usual thing, with the camera roving all over, trying to capture the whole thing in one shot, like the whole experience, but in a very kind of unthinking way. So don't do that. Again, think about your shots. Think about how they might edit together. You see, if you know you're going to edit this later, you won't need to move the camera around wildly trying to capture everything. Why not leave 20 minutes early so you have time to frame some nice shots? Illustrate your journey to work in, say, 10 shots that give the viewer a glimpse into the experience, no matter how miserable it might be. And at work, again, don't just capture some ugly random video. Take some time and think up some interesting shots that describe the experience of your workday. Use light, framing, camera movement creatively. You don't have to spend ages thinking up the shots, but video sketching requires you to stop and think a little bit. Hobby activities. Capture some shots which describe your activity or experience, which are more thought out and creative. Wildly roving camera is absolutely forbidden, unless you're doing it deliberately for creative reasons, of course. Going to the theatre, cinema, sport, game. As above, describe the experience with some thought out sketches. To help avoid the roving eye shot, think of each shot as a beginning, middle, and end. Where does the shot start, and where do you take the viewers? Quite often, when non-filmmakers are shooting a pan shot with their smartphone, they start recording, immediately pan, and as soon as they've reached the destination of the shot, they hit stop. This means what you are presenting to the audience is all pan shot. Remember, the audience need to see your first frame and your last frame, and they need time to take in what they see. Now, when you come to look back at this shot later, you will see the difference. The shot will look planned, and what you want the audience to see will be clearer. In fact, if you keep doing this, you will start to think differently about your shots. You will start to think, why am I going from here to here? In other words, you're now thinking like a filmmaker. While you're shooting these little sketches, probably involving your friends and family, you might start to get ideas for stories or characters. They might help unblock a story you're working on. This is especially true if you quietly document events with people being themselves, rather than make them aware you're filming them. For example, the other day we walked up to a restaurant in an old castle. The place was quite quiet and the manager was teaching a young guy how to be a waiter, but he just couldn't stop himself interfering, even though the young guy was doing fine. And I noticed the manager wasn't all that good at being a waiter himself, spilling my water as he poured it. Then a young, glamorous-looking couple with another guy sat at a table nearby. The couple looked like they'd just stepped out of a magazine photo shoot. Sure enough, the other guy pulled out his Nikon and they started shooting some tourism promo photos. At this point, the restaurant manager couldn't help but get involved, uninvited. So he started moving things around, designing the set. Then he grabbed the photographer's reflector and started helping. Well, it was an interesting scene with an interesting mix of characters. So I took the opportunity to film all this as it's taking place, using the architecture to create a nice frame. You can see the couple in the background. The restaurant manager is in the center holding the reflector. The student waiter watches on from the right of the frame. Anyway, maybe this will become an inspiration for a script or a film, or a scene in something I'm working on. Maybe it won't. But I have a record of these characters to use later if I wish. And more importantly, I kept my filmmaker eye working. All it took was jumping up with my phone and filming for a minute or two. The mistake we make is we think great filmmakers make great films with huge budgets featuring superstars. The truth is that becoming a better filmmaker is about doing lots of little things over and over until we get better. The story goes that the reason George Best was one of the greatest football players ever to play the sport was down to him practicing alone, using both feet. Most likely his friends didn't have the determination to keep practicing like him. Most likely, like when I was an impatient 18-year-old, they found it boring after 10 minutes. Because when we see a star soccer player doing incredible things on the pitch, we don't see the relentless practice they've been doing every day for years previously. But the truth is, it's not boring. Once you start to think this way, you can get addicted to capturing every moment in your life with the best shots you can come up with. You can use auto settings for speed, or you can boot up a camera app if you want the extra control. So that's it for this week. I hope you find it useful. Of course, if you haven't done so already, I would really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe to my channel.